Okay, we ready? Jen, are we ready online? Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to your city council. Welcome. We have two councilors online, Cunahan and Rivera. We also have a couple of folks who are going to give testimony online. I have a sign-up sheet, folks who would wish to speak to us. We're going to have folks speak about the ceasefire on the agenda, not right at the beginning. I think it'll enable us to discuss in the moment with that comment. So it will mean y'all are waiting a bit more, but it's not that long of a meeting. So I hope with no objection, that's what we'll do. So let's turn off our cell phones. Let's take a moment to realize that the land where we're doing business, folks have been doing business for tens of thousands of years before our people came. So there's that. Now let's pledge allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Abigail, do we have any agenda additions or corrections?
No, we do not.
Great, thank you. Online, we have Anne. I understand you want to speak to the ceasefire. Mr. Tui, I understand you might have a different topic. Would you like to take 3 minutes and talk to us now?
I'm going to be mostly ceasefire as well.
Great, so we'll have you at that time. Thank you. In that case, we have the Hood River County Reads, Hood River County Reads proclamation. Jean, it's so nice to see you, neighbor.
She's our librarian, and so her name got on it, which she wasn't coming, but anyway, so I'm here.
Well,
Now, I have 4 copies of the book, which I will offer to you, and you can fight about them. Or you can come next Saturday and pick up your own copy
give
because,
them right here to
yeah,
Abigail.
I'll give
Thank you so much.
and so, and you don't have to bring them back to us, just see that other people get to read things
Great.
like that. So now, as you have in your packet, you have the proclamation. And having had some background in talking to people who were my students, you don't read it to them, you've got it in your packet, hopefully you read it. Okay, and then down at the bottom, it asks you, therefore be resolved that the city establishes March 2nd to April 14th as Hood River County Reads. And so that's what we're asking you here today. And I want you to know, if you haven't already understood that, Michelle, the author, lives across the street, across the water in White Salmon. And if you have the geographic for January, she wrote the lead article. It's on butterflies. And so if you want to see something else that she has researched and done a lot of work on, you might want to look at that. I don't know how your mail happened, but mine 3 geographics came all at once in January. We will not complain about the mail system. So there I am asking you please to vote to adopt this on the 26th day of February, 2024.
Great, I will do that this evening at Mayor Call. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you. Okay. Good. Thank you for having us.
Joel Madsen, Housing Authority. Got it. Perfect.
It's your screen. They're yours. Good job.
Good evening, council. Glad to be here. My name is Joel Madsen, the Executive Director of Mid-Columbia Housing Authority and Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation. My goal this evening is to give you a reminder of who we are and what we do, and allow you an opportunity to ask us some questions that may be prompted from this presentation. I know it's been a while since I've been before you all, so it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Our organizations work together to promote and administer affordable housing solutions for lower income households throughout Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties in Oregon, as well as Klickitat, Skamania counties across the river. And we do this work through 4 primary lines of business. We administer rent assistance programs where we pay a portion of the rent directly into the private rental market on behalf of program participants. We work with our current program participants and residents at our properties to increase their earnings and access services in the community to help them achieve the goals that they've set out in their lives and to live more stably. Our third line of business that we work within is we're developers, owners, and managers of affordable housing communities. I'll talk more about each of these lines of business in a minute. And we take that approach in our development as nonprofit, right? We are nonprofit in our work. And our fourth line of business that we work within is around home ownership. We work with current and future homeowners in a variety of different capacities, again, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. I mentioned rent assistance. So throughout our region, we invest about $600,000 a month on behalf of 860 households approximately each month. That's the amount that we're investing in, again, the private rental market on behalf of our program participants. Some of the ways that we help make that work well is by making sure that our payment standards are able to compete. Our vouchers are able to compete in the market, which I know that that's been a challenge, certainly here in the tight housing market that we have in Hood River. So we have about 500 households that participate in the voucher program on this side of the river. That's the 3 counties. And in Hood River City itself, we have about 82 households that participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have special purpose vouchers that we target specifically to, for example, households that have experienced houselessness or are in jeopardy of losing their homes. And we have what's called emergency housing vouchers that we work in partnership with the Community Action Council to administer those vouchers. And we have a couple of those active in the market here in Hood River. And then we also have what's called mainstream housing vouchers, again, targeted toward folks who may have experienced houselessness or on the verge of houselessness. And we have a few of those in the market here as well. Our goal is that we have equitable distribution of our voucher program because it really is a market-based program and market-based solution to our challenges of affordable housing. We know we need to do more to create a more viable market for those vouchers to work in Hood River County, in particular Hood River City. So we're excited to be, help building more units through our partnership with Rand Road. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other strategies to take to have more of those vouchers in play here in Hood River. I mentioned resident services. So again, we connect our program participants and residents at our properties with services in the community. There are times when we are direct service providers. More often than not, we're indirect service providers where we help people connect to the services that are already available in our community. And that's where we rely on the partnerships with community-based organizations that are experts in their service provision, like the Next Door, One Community Health, some of our key partners in our work. So in here, just list a couple of the programs that we're actively involved in providing resident services to our program participants and residents at our properties. Our portfolio of, I mentioned we're developers, owners, and of affordable housing communities. And this is a map of kind of the expanse of our portfolio. So our properties go from as far west as Cascade Locks to as far east as Roosevelt, Washington. And we go a little bit north of the river and a little bit south of the river in some of our properties. So our portfolio consists of 425 units across 24 different properties, and no one property is financed the exact same way. So we are often compiling 6, 7 or more different capital sources to help make the development a reality, from USDA rural development resources through HUD or housing and urban development resources, as well as state and local resources to help make that happen. Our most recent addition to our portfolio is actually an acquisition rehab, where we were able to preserve an existing affordable housing complex that was owned by a single asset nonprofit. We were able to raise revenues and capital for that, and we're reinvesting in that property and perpetuating affordability out for a substantial amount of years. Obviously, we're excited to be working in partnership with community development partners in the city of Hood River to be advancing the development of Rand Road affordable housing, which 129 units. And Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation and Mid-Columbia Housing Authority were ecstatic to be part of that partnership and bringing in federal resources as part of that partnership. So our organization intentionally is project basing rent assistance that is going to help people achieve affordability at Rand Road with 39 project-based vouchers. Our organization helped lead requests for congressionally directed spending. We were able to acquire $3 million that we've been utilizing for pre-development activities to help keep the development moving forward. And we're, again, ecstatic to be part of that partnership and look forward to that progressing here this year and next. Our fourth line of business that we work within, as I mentioned, is around home ownership. Working with current and future homeowners in a variety of different capacities, whether that's helping to educate about the home buying process. We have pre and post-purchase counselors on staff. So helping people and with that counseling approach. We help people in the unfortunate circumstance if they're dealing with foreclosure to avoid that foreclosure when it makes sense to do so. And one of our other programs that we work within is on minor home repairs. We're improving our local housing stock for lower income homeowners that often is life and safety issues and accessibility upgrades to the homes that allow people who may be aging in place to be able to live there affordably longer. There's community land trust is on here. So we've recognized in our home ownership work that we need to do more to help lower income households get into home ownership beyond just program administration. Down payment assistance only goes so far, especially when it's such a tight housing market. So we're actively involved in working to develop more homeownership opportunities. And we're going to be implementing that land trust model in that approach to homeownership, where we would maintain ownership of the land and the homes would sell, allowing us to maintain that affordability into the future as well. So we have a couple of different sites, none here in Hood River County that we're actively working on, but in other service area that we're working on to advance affordable homeownership development. And before I end, I also want to acknowledge the construction excise tax. That's certainly a viable resource that's been utilized locally, was part of what helped Rand Road get to where it is. And a portion of what's collected locally goes back to Oregon Housing and Community Services. And then it comes back to our organization that we leverage with down payment assistance programs. So we have been working in Hood River County and within the city to try to get lower income households into home ownership through down payment assistance. And a portion of those revenues that you collected are part of that program that we utilize to do that. It frankly is a challenge to compete in this market. So, you know, a seed to plant of, you know, future discussions about how we can partner, you know, more intentionally with that resource and other resources to help lower income households get into home ownership here is certainly of interest to us. That concludes my summary and update on our organization's activities, and I'm happy to take any questions that may have prompted or other questions that you have for me.
Thank you, Joel. Council? Grant.
How would someone qualify for rental assistance? Go through that process.
Yeah, so we have an application process, and it is determined by income primarily. So priority is for extremely low income households to participate in the rent assistance program. We have a variety of different rent assistance programs. So the eligibility, I'm not the best person to rattle off all of the eligibility criteria, but I would encourage you and encourage others to contact our office and we will help navigate that frankly arduous process. But we have a good team on board that will help people do that.
Does it scale based on income in any way?
So a majority of our rent assistance, all of our rent assistance programs factor in income as it relates to how much will the program participant be responsible for paying versus how much our organization is paying. The general rule of thumb is that the program participant pays 30% of their income for the rent, and we cover the difference between what that is and what the payment standard is or fair market rent is.
Next.
Absolutely.
I'll ask the one I always ask people when they come. And one, I mean, I'm thrilled we've been working together on Rand Road, and I'm hoping that's gonna come to fruition soon. Continue to appreciate your engagement on that. Big picture, wondering, you know, where more overlap or collaboration is possible, or where you'd like to see it, whether that's at the, you know, political realm at Devon Salem or something local. I know you mentioned talking longer term about the homeownership down payments, but other thoughts?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think there's always opportunity to work more closely together. And, you know, this is a long-term relationship that our organizations have had with each other, and will continue. So how can we lean into that to best help you all facilitate the goals that you've prioritized? I know housing has been front and center for you all for a long time. Let's lean into our relationship and tap each other's expertise. We want to help you be successful, not just in our program areas, but we know that a healthy housing market means that what we do is going to be easier to accomplish as well. So just generally, we're all in as well. And I know that there's good working relationships there. We've never been to this point where it's such a hot topic item and across federal, state, and local level housing, that is. Everybody is talking about it. And that's daunting in a lot of ways, and it's a huge opportunity in many other ways. So having your advocacy at those levels is certainly going to help, again, with our programs and what we do, but also just the more global housing market that we have that is challenged and not working for many people, not just lowest income folks, but people across the entire economic strata.
Joel, will you elaborate a little bit more on the role you've played in the governor's housing availability, or I'm going to say that wrong, but that commission that you served on?
Sure. So I was lucky enough to be appointed to the governor's Housing Production Advisory Council. On her first day in office, she declared a state of emergency and issued an executive order that created this Housing Production Advisory Council. And our work has been completed. So it was a year-long process by which we navigated. Our charge was to create a plan, a framework to increase the state's production of housing by over 80% from what it historically had been doing. And the end result is that there's a framework and guide that has, I think, 59 recommendations that came from this production council to increase the state's housing production. And I participated in two of I think there were 5 work groups. So land availability work group, as well as the finance work group. And so I was close to more of the recommendations coming from those work groups. So don't drill me too much on all the recommendations, but I understand that the final report is actually imminent to be published. So there's a great website on the governor's website that you can link to, and it has a lot more information in there about the work of the Housing Production Advisory Council. And you can drill down into the specifics of some of the recommendations that came about through that way.
Thanks for your work on that. I think it served our city very well to have such a involved partner. Other questions, comments for Joel?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Gladys.
Joel, thank you for being here today, and I appreciate all of the work that you and the organization does. If a homeowner was looking to rent their house, but to be a part of that program, what would be the best way for them to do so? And if you can just highlight a little bit of the process.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We are certainly interested in any landlord that wants to partner with us for rent assistance program. So we want to make it as easy as possible for landlords to participate in our program. There are some guiding principles that we obviously have to follow. And one of those includes the homes have to meet housing quality standards, which is an inspection process that we go through whenever someone is utilizing rent assistance within a rental home. So that's something that a landlord should expect as part of the process. Also, the rents have to meet what we've defined as the payment standards, acceptable payment standards. So we cannot pay more for a particular unit. We can't pay above the payment standard that's been established. And those are based off of annual publications of the fair market rents. So I know it gets complicated fast, but those are the two big things, right? Is that we have to adhere to our program requirements in order to participate with a landlord. But again, we want to make it as easy as possible for landlords to participate in that program itself. So give us a call. Okay. Oh,
Gladys, you're muted.
You're on mute, Gladys.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that it is an easier process for a homeowner to go through this and not a daunting task, and that we need as many affordable housing options as possible. I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Gladys. Good.
So Joel, this is Tim.
Go ahead, Tim. Zoom.
Can you describe how the Housing Authority incorporates environmental sustainability into their practices?
It's a great question, and I'm trying to think of how it's most applicable in our program areas. And what comes to mind first and foremost is in our development work. Obviously, we're adhering to the local codes and ordinances, and oftentimes regulations that come with our federal funds. But we also take pride in our portfolio, and the properties that we're developing meet energy efficiency standards, right? And whether it's a LEED standard or whatnot, we take pride in that approach in our development activities. I know we're looking into that and how we align with the energy code, and I'm not calling it the right term, but the energy plan, Hood River County Energy Plan, and how our project developments align with that. We take that into account as well. So it probably mostly shows up in our development activity, is where we're most aligned there.
Thank you so much. I'm very thankful that you guys are there and doing what you do. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Pleasure.
Thanks for being here, Joel. Just wondering, it's probably not an easy question to answer, but if you could summarize just in the near term, what you think the biggest challenges that we need to overcome to get to some of those 59 recommendations in the city of Hood River are versus other areas that you work within the gorge, what those might be at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, honestly, I would point back to the housing production strategies that the city has worked on over there and updated, right? I mean, those are good recommendations, and we need to keep working through them. I think, I took a lot of that local work that we've been doing and put it in front of the broader audience of, at the state level, right? There's a lot of things that we can only do so much locally, and we need that support and backing from our state partners. I think about a recommendation that I was close to and that we've seen in local production strategies that, how do we utilize public lands, right? And there are public lands within the urban growth boundary that, frankly, we should be looking to see if they can produce housing on, right? And how do we co-locate some of the services that may be currently provided there and leverage that, right? So, and what I'm talking about is state-owned lands in particular. And in the recommendation, I just have to acknowledge this, there was a picture in the presentation about leveraging state-owned and leased lands for affordable housing production. The ODOT site was on the front of this presentation about the recommendation. It's like, well, yes, there are examples within many cities, certainly this city here, where we are choosing to utilize our land within our urban growth boundary for a different purpose, besides the emergent issue and crisis that we have for addressing housing. And so, you know, we need to make that intentional decision and see if we can unlock some of those opportunities. But it comes back again, just to a lot of the local production strategies and working through those, which are time intensive, resource intensive, and it just takes a while to see them come to fruition. I mean, we're living that in just a development activity, but there's much more in code refinement, in infrastructure investments that we can align with the goal of housing production.
Thank you.
Joel, thanks a lot for coming again. I always get a kick out of it. Yeah, housing has been vitally important to the city, especially at a policy level, for the 10 years that we've been working together, or more now. And I really appreciate you being a key, you and your organization being a key part of the team, and would constantly encourage you to, you know, be a squeaky wheel when you think that that's possible, and be working on stuff like the ODA property in partnership with us. So you know, we're going to work better together as a team, and you're a big part of that. And you know, 100% of your time is thinking about housing. So I think that's hopefully it's win-win, and make sure the city knows when there's opportunities that you see. Because it's our goal. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for that invitation.
All right, thanks again, Joel, for sparing the evening for us.
My pleasure
to work with you.
Thanks for the
See you soon.
opportunity.
Great, that takes us to our consent agenda.
I have one minor edit to the minutes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, find it again. Page 25 of the packet, third paragraph from the bottom, currently says Councillor Saunders is also in conceptual support. Piece that would be important moving forward is that there's more outreach towards those who speak Spanish and natives. And I'm pretty sure that was Councillor Rivera's comment, and so I just wanted to correct that.
Gladys, may we attribute that to you? Yes, thumbs up. Make that adjustment.
Then I am going to move that we approve the consent agenda with that minor edit to the minutes.
Moved by Connor,
Second.
seconded by Grant. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Action items, Chris.
So the City of Hood River financial policies provide for the city council to review the actual beginning fund balances as verified from the audit. The fiscal year beginning fund balances are calculated after all of the invoices and revenues are received for the prior fiscal year. So what is passed in the budget is just an estimate based on expectations. Additionally, changes in revenue, expenses, or operating conditions regularly require appropriation adjustments for the fiscal year budget. So attached as a resolution 2024-02 is the Q2 supplemental budget. This is updated for the actual opening balances as shown from the audit, and then make certain appropriations and adjustments through December 31st, 2023. So I can walk through the resolution, starting with the general fund. There's an upward adjustment to the opening fund balance. And then there are adjustments for unanticipated department expenditures. As it relates to fire, there are two adjustments. There's an increase in fire payroll expense. That is the retroactive pay as a result of the successful conclusion of the negotiated collective bargaining agreement. And then there is a movement of a capital outlay. So there's a capital outlay that's moved to the equipment replacement fund. So there is both the movement, the reduction of the capital outlay, but then on the other end, there is a transfer from fire to the equipment fund. So that change has a zero impact. On non-departmental expenses, there are a couple of adjustments. There was an IRS penalty for the failure to make a proper tax deposit. It was a $19,000 payment penalty from the IRS. It should be noted that the payment was correct. but it was correct in both amount and time, although it was applied to the wrong quarter. So there was an appeal to the IRS. The IRS denied the appeal, and so it is a budget change. Additionally, during the February 12th Urban Renewal Agency, there was the approval of the West Side 5-year action plan. That is a $50,000 project that will be advanced through the general fund and then reimbursed from West Side once tax increment financing begins being collected. There are 2 transfers that are outlined in the general fund. One I discussed was the fire equipment purchase. So it's a transfer from fire to the equipment reserve fund. Additionally, there is a general fund transfer for the hiring of the human resources manager, which is a new permanent position for the city. So during this year, the city has hired a human resource manager. That position commenced August 1st, 2023. It's a new permanent position for the city. Under normal budget procedures, this would be allocated as part of the admin fund to each of the individual departments. The general fund, the sewer fund, and the water fund comprise 85% of the admin allocation. And so for administrative ease, it has been allocated 50% to the general fund, 25% to the sewer fund, 25% to the water fund. And so you'll see transfers in each of those individual funds. There is the final change in the general fund is a contingency transfer. And so that's a $50,000 contingency adjustment. And again, that is applied towards the URA 5-year action plan increase in budget expenditure to the general fund. Road fund, there are 2 changes. There's an upward adjustment to the opening fund balance. And then there's an adjustment to debt service. So there were internal loans to the road fund and the sewer fund. Nope, I'm sorry, to go back. Stormwater. And so the debt service schedule was not finalized when the final budget was passed. And so this is a small adjustment just reflecting actual debt service. Water fund, there's an upward adjustment to the beginning fund balance. And then there is the transfer to the internal services fund that we discussed for the human resources manager position. In the sewer fund, there is also fund balance. And then there are 2 adjustments in operations relating to the Jacobs contract. So on May 8th, 2023, there was an amendment to the contract that was approved in the amount of $155,000. There was subsequently a supplemental budget that addressed this for the previous budget period. That was never invoiced. And so that expense was moved over to this current fiscal year. So the increase of beginning fund balance is in certain part attributable to that expense not being incurred in the prior year. Additionally, on the January 8th, 2024 council, there was approved a repair closeout invoice from Jacobs in the amount of $63,117 for repair work. That was not budgeted in the current fiscal year. So that change is both an increase in the operating expenditures and a decrease in the contingency. There's a debt service adjustment for a loan fee. Loan fee is an operating expenditure, not debt service. So that was moved from debt service to operating expenditures. And then there is the transfer to the internal services fund. Again, the allocation, the 25% allocation to the human resources manager. Stormwater fund, there was a downward adjustment in the beginning fund balance, and then allocated expenses are adjusted for the reduction in resources. So there's just an overall offsetting reduction in operations, lower spend on stormwater projects. Restricted revenue fund, downward adjustment in the beginning fund balance. This related to the opening fund balance for the fire general obligation bond fund. That was closed for this fiscal year, and the balance was transferred to the general fund. And so the downward beginning fund balance is offset by a reduction in the transfer of that outstanding balance. The last one is the internal services fund. This has the largest adjustment. There are actually 2 adjustments in resources. The first is a downward adjustment of about $930,000 for the beginning fund balance. The internal loans advanced from the equipment replacement reserve and approved by City Council on June 26th, 2023, were not accurately accounted for in the opening balance. And so there is a downward adjustment. And then the $152,000 in incoming transfers is both the $20,500 equipment replacement fund deposit from the fire department, and then the $131,600 from the general fund, water fund, and sewer fund relating to the human resources manager position. There are additional adjustments with regards to expenditures. There's the increase in admin expenditures relating to the human resource manager position, and there's a decrease in the fleet and equipment. This relates to engine number 4, which will not be delivered until November 2024. So that $900,000 expenditure is removed from the current budget and then will be reserved for in our next budget. And then obviously there was the addition of the $20,500 for the budgeted fire equipment purchase that got transferred to the replacement fund. And then there is an additional contingency adjustment of $30,000 to balance revenues, resources, and expenditures. The reserve fund has one adjustment, which is just the upward adjustment to the beginning fund balance. And the agency fund makes reciprocal adjustments to the beginning fund balance and revenue remittance. As this is a fiduciary fund and a pass-through, lower deposits reflected greater distributions in the previous fiscal year. So those funds will not be advanced this fiscal year. So those are all the changes as it relates to the Q2 supplemental budget. Please let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Gladys.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
My question is around the $19,000 for the IRS. For future, what are we doing to mitigate the risk in order to not have to pay a penalty on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a couple extenuating circumstances that related to it. One, the position that was responsible for making that payment was filled by a relatively new employee. And there was no SOP, statement of procedure, that's what related to that payment. So there was an administrative error that was a result of that payment being remitted to the improper period. So we've prepared and provided an SOP that sort of outlines that procedure. And I believe, if it has not already been I believe that the explanation of that error and then the SOP can be circulated to the city councilors for their review.
Perfect. Thank you. My last question is, are there any emerging challenges or opportunities that council should consider in future budget cycles?
Well, it's a big question. I think we will talk about that as part of the upcoming budget process. I think that the biggest challenge is going to be managing expenses that are increasing, outpacing inflation, outpacing the sort of tax revenue. So as we talked about previously, the primary source of revenue for the city is resulting from property taxes. Property taxes are restricted as far as the maximum increase, and for the last couple of years have not kept pace with inflation. And so city expenses have outpaced its revenues. And we may see that in certain categories in the future, particularly as it relates to, sort of personnel expenses. So that's certainly a challenge that the city will be facing, moving forward. And then I think that the next opportunity is going to be, sort of how can the city identify resources to apply to its priorities, particularly housing. So I don't have an answer for that, right? But that's certainly something that we'll be discussing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. A couple, I think, simple questions. The first one, the loan to the Urban Renewal Agency for that pre-work on West Side.
Yeah.
The counter piece of that shows up on the urban renewal budget, or is that right?
I
always look for the two pieces that match up.
Yeah. So as of current, the West Side URA does not have, has not collected tax increment financing, right? So the general fund has advanced the formation costs, and it'll advance certain organizational costs, that will basically be a payable, sort of a payable from the URA. So it will not appear in the budget, because it will not actually, so it will not appear in the current budget, until such time as it has revenue, and then it will show the payback of the loan. It will show up on its financials as sort of a due to the general fund.
Right. Yeah, it's just sort of like, okay, what, how many things are reminding us that those two pieces are gonna balance out?
Where it's just, so administratively, those expenses have a sort of action code to them, right? So they are coded to a specific category so that they're just sort of tallied as a payable.
And then my second question is, I think similar, which is the, almost 900K for the big truck that isn't happening in this fiscal year.
Yeah,
I expected to see the negative number to be a positive number in ending year cash or something.
So under normal circumstances, it would be. But because the internal fund loans were not properly allocated for this fiscal year, right? That was the offset, sort of in that.
So this is getting us back to reality.
Yes, correct.
Right.
That's correct.
And there's no structural, that it's just a biggish number, right?
Well, so it is the biggest number.
Yeah.
In reality, the interfund loan should have reduced the opening balance sort of at the onset of the budget, right? So there is no functional impact other than the sort of the corrected adjustment.
Right. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
I think this is more a comment or a request than a question, but with the HR director, the kind of simplified payment this year of general fund, water and sewer versus what we'd be planning to do long-term that's added to the admin services thing. I guess that makes me a little uncomfortable from a budget accuracy or budget transparency end. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that a bit, or if that's something that can be changed to kind of match how we treat the rest of our, kind of admin-y.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the general fund, sewer and water make up about 85% of the admin allocation. So again, for admin ease, I allocated to those three. The funds that did not have an allocation that would normally under the admin is the stormwater, road, and the building department. So collectively, they make up 15% of the admin allocations. So if it were to be allocated to each department based on how admin allocations are, there would be a slight reduction in the general fund allocation, a slight increase in the sewer allocation, a reduction in water, and then allocations added to stormwater, road, and building, right? And so the offset in the supplemental budget would be transfers from those funds to the internal service fund to sort of properly allocate it. So again, it was a sort of administrative shortcut. It can be adjusted, but the adjustments would be to reallocate the percentages and then add transfers where required.
Thank you. And then I guess this is maybe for the rest of the council is I not to add more work to Chris's plate, but I would prefer that we did match kind of our actual internal policy and do that services allocation for that role in this budget. And so I'm wondering thoughts.
Is the plan for the 24-25 budget to reallocate across all the different groups?
Yeah, so it will. So that position will land in the administrative department, the internal services fund. And so that's where the allocation comes from. So for the next fiscal year, it will get allocated the same as all other admin costs. And I'll just speak to from an administrative standpoint. It does require sort of making some adjustments to the supplemental budget. It's not particularly difficult, but it would then move this to a consent calendar for the next city council.
Thanks for bringing that up, Megan.
in general would prefer transparency to a shortcut, but I understand there's a minimus question about, sounds like in the next year it will be more clear and observable.
Yep.
The next year is still 4 months away on the calendar. We still have half this year. This is the end of Q2. This is December 31st. We still have the rest of this half of this fiscal year that would abide by this same practice. I concur with Councilor Saunders that we should allocate as we've been allocating, if it's going to be, especially if it's going to be a simple adjustment.
Yeah, it's not difficult.
All right, I'm hearing a majority for that, so if you could make that
Absolutely.
adjustment, that'd be great.
I can. Great,
Thank you.
very good.
Other comments, questions on this topic?
Thanks for keeping our books clean.
There you go.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Sir.
What's that?
The motion. I move that the city council approve resolution 2024-02 to make appropriations and adjust the adopted budget for fiscal year 2023-24.
Moved by Grant.
Mayor, may I interrupt?
Please.
With the change that you've just asked for, I think the numbers in that resolution would change. So my recommendation is that you ask us to bring this back to you at your next council meeting.
Okay. Kill my motion, please.
Great, we were not seconded.
Thank you, Councilor.
Filled, so it will be brought back to us for action. Great, thanks. Okay, we have reached the item that I think most of the audience is here for. If you would like to speak to us, you should sign up. I have a sheet and there's another sheet. So if you haven't signed up and would like to speak, please do make your way over here to sign up. We do have 7 here plus more. If someone has said the thing you were going to say, it's okay to say that instead of repeating. In my experience up here, long-windedness does not carry the day. We do want to hear the points that you feel are important. So please let us know what you want us to know. And if that means the gal before me already said it, say that. I don't have, sometimes these kind of venues have a pro and a con microphone. We're all just going to come up to the podium here in the order that folks signed up. I'm going to start with the folks online. Thanks for showing up. We'll start with Brian Chewy. Brian, are you there? I don't hear you,
I'm
Brian.
here.
Okay, good. Now I hear you.
Got me?
If we could keep everybody to about 2 minutes, that would, I think the messages will get across. Carry on, please, Brian.
Okay. So I tell you, I made an attempt to take this agenda item for ceasefire seriously. And I'm struggling with that. And then the language of it looks like it was written by a Hamas propagandist. If there was a list of issues that the city of Hood River should just sit out, I think this one's toward the top of that list. Not only does everyone with a triple-digit IQ see this as nothing more than just self-important virtue signaling, you're also about to virtue signal on the wrong side of an issue. So, and before I finish, I'm going to suggest something serious and specific that someone who wants a ceasefire might actually advocate for. You state that the reason for speaking up now is to model leadership. This is not leadership. And frankly, leadership is not something that anyone associates with this city council. You are followers. Leaders, if this was their position, would have done this more than 3 months ago. My hope is that one of you or more would exhibit some leadership by refusing to participate in this nonsense and suggest that until you're able to handle city business competently, you focus on that. As an example and suggestion, today, after 3 months, I was finally told my license for a short-term rental that I've operated for 10 years had its license renewed. It was required by December 31st. The reason this took so long in part is that you have allowed the creation of a complicated system that even your own staff can't understand and execute. So maybe rather than waste time on issues that are beyond your understanding, you could just do your jobs. Additionally, as part of my STR approval, I was asked to pay an application fee that was not required by your own rules, but your staff didn't know this. This happened with both the current administrator and the previous one. I understand you had a staff change recently, but even they didn't understand the jobs. And this all required intervention by the planning director, who I think has more important things to do, like maybe help facilitate the creation of some housing, for example. I expect that I'm the only one overcharged, and I hope that you will do an audit of all the fees charged to everybody else in this position and return that stolen money. So back to this non-city business stuff. What is happening in Gaza is horrible, and it is a result of barbaric actions of the elected government of the people who are suffering, and were supported by a good number, and they were supported by a good number of those people who are now suffering. It's heartbreaking, and the perpetrators of the October 7 attack knew this would be the result. Your suggested resolution reveals bias and ignorance. The suggestion that your leadership is useful or wanted on this issue is unbelievably arrogant. It's as if you don't understand who or what Hamas is, why they exist, or what they do and what they want. My serious suggestion is that for you to insist on pursuing this ridiculousness, that you keep your biased opinions out of the resolution and prioritize only the call for Palestinian return of hostages that Palestinians still hold, whether by Hamas or by other Palestinian groups. And why you wouldn't lead with that reveals some kind of combination of bias and ignorance. So here's some suggested language to add to your resolution or as an alternative.
Brian, run out of time. Can you wrap it up, please?
Yeah, okay, I'll give you some suggested language. Whereas Palestinians still hold many hostages taken during the violent attack and massacre on Israel, all hostages must immediately be freed before another ceasefire is possible. Where a ceasefire cannot be long-lasting until Hamas is removed from territory adjacent to Israel, Hamas should immediately cede leadership to another controlling authority. And whereas a ceasefire was in place before the Hamas-Palestinian attacks and massacre on Israel on October 7, 2023. So in the spirit of this, I think that any resolution should probably include sending you, Mayor Blackburn, to Gaza to demonstrate this leadership that you think is so important, and maybe negotiate for this ceasefire that's so important to Hood River. And we could crowdfund this so that it wouldn't require any special appropriations. And I'm happy to kick in the first $1,000. And I think that, maybe before you discuss this thing, that, you brush up on some history. And most importantly, and that's
Brian, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I asked for 2 minutes. This has been 4.
So normally it's 3, Mayor. So one final sentence. Most importantly, this issue is neither an appropriate or productive use of the city's time, and it was irresponsible to waste city resources discussing this thing. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Brian. Ann Harrison. Ann, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Mayor Blackburn and City Council members, for accepting my comment regarding the proposed resolution that the City of Hood River call for a permanent ceasefire in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. It may seem out of place or inappropriate for a small town to be making such a resolution regarding people so far removed from us. But are they really so far away? I've attended several of the Friday vigils that have been held across the street. We gather to call for peace, to call for an end to the fighting, to call for our leaders to stop using our tax dollars to fund further killing. We speak out with our signs and chants because we do not believe that war and killing will solve anything. At the vigils, we are encouraged by many who pass by waving and honking their horns in support. But for me, the most important outcome of these vigils is that we are joining as a community in support of our neighbors right here in Hood River. We have residents who feel strong ties to the people of Gaza and Israel. When we stand with them, calling for peace, we let them know that they are not alone. Last year, this council supported the Black in the Gorge group in holding the first ever Gorge Juneteenth celebration at Jackson Park. In doing so, the city of Hood River made it known that it stands with its African American residents. Though this may have seemed like a small gesture, it was actually huge. It said to Black residents that we belong, and it said to the entire community that the city supports and celebrates us. Making a public resolution in support of ceasefire in Gaza is a bold and powerful pronouncement for our town to make. Though we are small, our voice will be heard because we will be joining with many other towns and cities across the country. But an equally important reason for the city of Hood River to make this public resolution is that it will be heard by our own community members, and especially those with cultural, familial, or religious ties to Gaza and Israel. It says that we care, that we stand with them, and that we are willing to speak out against war and genocide and call for peace. Thank you for accepting this comment into the records.
Thank you very much, Ann. We'll have Ruth Sue, followed by Susan Crowley.
Good evening, Mayor Blackburn and council members. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, an anti-Nazi dissident, said, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. I cannot be silent when my tax dollars are used to continue to kill innocent children, women, and men. I know the situation is complex and long-standing. The Gaza Strip has been a closed concentration camp for decades, whether or not we have heard about it. Now it's a place of unspeakable horror. And those who talk about learning history and why do the Palestinians elect Hamas may not know that no elections have been permitted since 2007. And also that the Israeli government has divided Palestinians into 5 different groups. So it is very much about divide and make it difficult to get together. I also know many Jewish people also condemn the evil, the terrible over the top response to Hamas. What Hamas did on October 7th is awful. I am not condemning any, I am not supporting any of that, but the response has been totally inappropriate. And the fact that we continue to support the Israeli government and their mass destruction is really a problem. Recently, for the 3rd time, the US cast the sole vote against a UN Security Council resolution for a ceasefire. I am deeply troubled that the US continues to fund and arm the genocide. This must stop, and I support Hood River taking a stand, along with some other communities, on this really important issue for our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Susan Crowley, followed by Amira Mala.
Good evening, Susan Crowley, Hood River. I actually am here to speak to Mr. Tui's comments, and I don't think they were unreasonable comments. A lot of people echo those comments that refer to whether or not this is an issue that's outside your bailiwick, outside your authorized area. And that's not unreasonable to ask. So I want to talk to that, and I have given you hard copies because my testimony came in bits and pieces. And it did that because over these last 3.5 months, I've seen these absolutely appalling photographs that I think we've all seen, and I've included some in my packet. And they were absolutely horrifying to me. But the reality is that without the US providing weapons to Israel, and having done so for over 60 years, this wouldn't happen. And that really is the only way to stop and put pressure on Israel from continuing an assault, which amounts to a genocide in Gaza. And those aren't my words. So the reason why this is really within your remit, this is something that opinion leaders like yourselves can really make a difference with, is articulated by a federal judge in California. And recently, a group of advocates for children sued in federal court to have the court order the Biden administration to stop providing assistance, military assistance to Israel on the grounds that it's assisting in genocide. And that judge found that there was a plausible reason to believe that with these deaths and this destruction where you have whole families wiped out, whole neighborhoods destroyed, the clear indication is there's an intent to move Gazans out of Gaza. That is genocide. That's the legal definition. Moreover, under international law, if genocide's occurring, no nation can assist with that. No nation can provide weapons to help that happen. And that's what we're doing. So what the judge said was, I have no jurisdiction. He didn't act. He said, I can't act. The law doesn't give me the right to act, which is basically Mr. Tui's argument, although his was more nuanced. But what he said was this: I can't act. But he did what judges hardly ever do. And I practiced law. I know what judges do and don't do, for better or for worse. They very rarely say, I have no jurisdiction, but I'm going to go in and talk about it. But that's what this judge did. And he said, let me quote you what he said.
Susan, if you could wrap up.
2 minutes, sorry. He said, it's plausible Israel, that conduct amounts to genocide. And then he said, he went on, quote, it is every individual's obligation to confront the current siege in Gaza. Every individual means all of us. Basically, anything we can do within the scope of our authority in the community is something we have a moral obligation to do. And for that reason, I'm asking you to look at those photographs, look within yourselves at other things you've seen and heard, and please help do something. It is an important step. It will make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Amira, followed by Chad Mayer.
Thank you, Mayor Blackburn and City Council. My name is Amira Malak, and I've been a teacher in Hood River County School Districts for 21 years and a mother for 17 years. I'm here to speak in support of the ceasefire resolution. I'd like to first share some numbers. Since October 7th, 392 educational facilities have been destroyed in Gaza. More than 12,300 Palestinian children and young teens have been killed in the conflict, the equivalent of the student population of 10 Hood River Valley high schools. That means children and young teens make up about 43% of the dead in Gaza. UNICEF, the Agency for Protection of Children, estimates that at least 17,000 children in the Gaza Strip are unaccompanied or have been separated from their immediate relatives since October 7th. In the course of the conflict, NGO Save the Children found more than 10 children a day lose one or both of their legs. As a high school teacher, especially this year, I am acutely aware of the effects of trauma on youth. By UNICEF's estimate, about 500,000 children were already in need of mental health and psychosocial support in Gaza before the assault began. Today, it estimates that the number has doubled to more than 1 million children as a result of what it describes as a war on children that has made the Gaza Strip the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. I'm also wearing the name of a child killed in Gaza to honor the human beings behind these numbers. Nada Musa Asmiu El Kamal, age 6, is no longer alive. The fact that taxes on my work with children over these 21 years have funded the suffering and death of children is absolutely devastating. You might ask, what difference will it make if a small governing body in a tiny town in Oregon makes a statement? It'll show we're not silent in the face of suffering. We have students and families with relatives in the vicinity of the bombings, which have now extended to Lebanon. Let them know you care. Let us all know we live in a town with compassion and heart. Our young people are watching us. What are we teaching them? For all of our humanity, please pass the ceasefire resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Chad and then Suzanne Wright.
Hello, thank you. My name is Chad Mayo. I live in Hood River. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 10 years. I'm going to kind of point my conversation for a ceasefire on Gaza through kind of a nursing healthcare lens. Right now, 11 out of 35 hospitals in Gaza are not fully, but partially operational. And if you would kind of imagine that from like the Dalles to Portland is about, and Vancouver area would be about that many hospitals. I was a nurse during COVID, ICU nurse in both the Dalles and Hood River, which was a difficult time. And I'm almost afraid to say COVID in this setting, but you know, that was, you know, honestly, and I'm just saying that out of context, not as anything else, but that was a scary time. And I'm looking at what my fellow healthcare workers are going through in Gaza, and I can't imagine what that's like when you are in the ICU and you have someone on a ventilator and you don't know if the power is going to be there. It's a terrible feeling. I mean, my heart would jump when we did a test in our hospitals that went from being on the power grid, and then we do a generator test, and there's this split second where you have a patient and they're on a ventilator. It's not even a full second. It's like literally a split second where the power flickers, and everybody like hearts just kind of jump for a second as it kind of come back on. And that's just, I can't imagine what they are going through. I agree with the people that before me about the ceasefire and some of those things, but I just wanted to give more of a healthcare context to what I'm seeing. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Suzanne and then Reverend Miranda.
Hello, Council. Good evening. My name is Suzanne Wright, Hood River resident for 18 years and co-owner of Solstice Pizza. A majority of Americans support a ceasefire, and we are fed up with our national leadership and President Biden not listening. Senator Merkley has listened to his constituents and has called for a ceasefire, and we must ask you, our elected officials, to listen to us. We must do something to add our city's name to the growing list of more than 70 cities who have passed resolutions calling for the end of this genocide. We know how well this community takes care of one another. Being a business owner and receiver of donation requests of many well-deserving causes, many on a daily basis, we are a generous and compassionate city. This is who we are. In my involvement through my son's school and sports, my father's dementia services, food insecurity, the housing crisis, environmental stewardship, I know how much this community cares, and our care should extend to our global neighbors in Gaza. Please know my care also extends to our Jewish neighbors and my family members grieving horrific losses as well. Let's show our Muslim and Arab community members here in Hood River that we stand with them. Let's add our name to those brave ones calling for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next will be Ben on Cascade Avenue. Sorry, Ben. No.
Good evening. My name is Miranda Burmese-Goler. I'm the pastor of Spirit of Grace Lutheran Methodist Church in Hood River, a place I'm lucky enough to call home. As a person of faith, I believe that all human life is connected, that my wholeness and well-being and liberation is inherently tied to that of the rest of humanity and creation. That so long as any of us are suffering from violence and oppression, none of us will ever find true freedom and liberation, for our souls are bound to that of each other. As a called and ordained minister of the Church of Christ in the office of Word and Sacrament, I am called to proclaim this truth each and every day of my life, which is why I stand before you today. I could use my time to tell you about the 30,000 Palestinian lives that have been taken from us just since October 7th. I could tell you about the more than 70,000 Palestinians who have been brutally bodily wounded, many of whose bodies will never be the same again. I could tell you that what makes this a genocide is not merely the loss of life, but the conditions under which the remaining lives are forced to endure. Forced famine and starvation, forced evacuation when there is nowhere else left to go, hospitals and universities and churches leveled, not to mention homes utterly destroyed. But I have confidence in your humanity. I have confidence that you can see the loss of life that is occurring under our watch, and you know that there is no excuse to justify violence like this. But why does it matter that our small town of 8,341 citizens speak out against this genocide occurring on the other side of the world? Because we are not merely innocent bystanders in all of this. Our country actively funds the Israeli military, which means our country is actively funding genocide, which means our state is actively funding genocide, which means our beloved town of Hood River is actively funding genocide. In 2023, the state of Oregon contributed an estimated $41,288,443 to the Israeli military, $133,247 of which came from us here in Hood River. We have a moral obligation to stand up and say no more, not in our name, not with our funds, not while we draw breath. And while it might feel like our small town cannot have much impact, the whole premise of our nation is we are stronger together. We can join the more than 70 US cities that have already adopted ceasefire resolutions, including Detroit, Seattle, Minneapolis, and Chicago. And together we can put pressure on President Biden to revoke funding for genocidal actions and call for not only an immediate ceasefire, but a lasting, peaceful political solution that will give life and restoration for all people. Thus far in Oregon, the cities of Eugene and Corvallis are the only ones to join in the call for an immediate ceasefire. It is my greatest hope that tonight Hood River will join them and that soon after others will be inspired to do the same. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lauren. Ben, who lives on Cascade Avenue, whose last name I can't read, followed by Lana Salman.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ben Lewitt. Hood River's been my home since 2001. I'm happy to see you and all my neighbors here from town. A resolution has been brought forward to ask you, our city council, to vote in favor of a ceasefire resolution in an ongoing war. Seems like a no-brainer. Raise your hand if you favor peace. But I urge you to vote against this resolution, and here's why. It's outside the scope of the Hood River City Council. Your mission statement is, quote, provide essential services for the lowest possible cost to enhance the quality of life in Hood River. In my understanding, our city council does not involve itself in foreign policy. This resolution is divisive and will likely create disharmony within our community. People of goodwill can disagree about ancient, complicated conflicts, and the city government should not choose a side. It's possible that our meetings could become rallies with neighbors carrying signs and placards. Advocates describe the resolution as, quote, interfaith. It is not. Ceasefire Now has no support from any mainstream Jewish organization, and this resolution does not read as balanced. Often, ceasefire has been used as a rallying cry for those with anti-Israel or anti-Jewish sentiments. This conflict is ancient and fraught with difficulty. There are legitimate, passionate feelings on all sides. I don't believe that it is an issue that the city council can or should offer an opinion. Let's look at the resolution. Whereas any indiscriminate killing on innocent civilians is a violation of international humanitarian law. Is this about October 7th? Whereas Israeli armed and military force has murdered tens of thousands. Israeli murdered innocents. This is inflammatory language. Third, hundreds of thousands more lives are at imminent risk if a permanent ceasefire is not achieved and humanitarian aid is not delivered without delay. Humanitarian aid, sorry. All right. The federal government of the US has a major role in providing, so this is a federal issue. Call your congressman, take action, make your voices heard, but leave the city of Hood River out of it. The members of the City Council of Hood River are invited to voice their responsibility and speak up. No, your charter is to provide services for the quality of life in Hood River. City councilors, to facilitate the government of Israel and Palestine to come to a political two-state solution. If you say government of Palestine, I'm not even sure what you mean. Is that Hamas? Is that Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Is that Mahmoud Abbas? Is that the Palestine Authority? I point this out only to illustrate the complexity of this situation. So what can we do? I'm just one person. I'm happy to listen with an open heart to my neighbors who brought this resolution. I'm happy to learn. Maybe together we can explore how to help. I'm available. Together, let's build peacefulness in Hood River and vote no on this resolution.
Lana and then Matthew Barman.
Good evening. The last phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance says, "with liberty and justice for all." As a part of the youth of Hood River, I'm trying to find liberty and justice in this world. Ironically, it seems I'm blind. I'm not sure how burning olives, starving children, bodies on streets, and bombed buildings stand for justice, for life. We promise our children a world full of love, diversity, and freedom. We never tell them that when they grow up, they will see a harsh world, a world where we use silence as a weapon, where others' lives are not important, in addition to a whole history and ethnicity getting erased with no one to say no. I am not sure how many cries and wails we have to hear to realize that there are people in Palestine, thousands of kilometers away, and I feel a knife for every life. I cry for all those lives that could have led. The death toll has surpassed 30,000, and I'm quite unsure how such numbers are not considered genocide. I implore you to use your power to stop the violence and slaughter happening in Palestine, especially Gaza. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Matthew, followed by Vicky Stifter.
Matthew Barman. I live in town for about 10 years. And I also share similar sentiments of Ben does, that this resolution, the language in it, which I find somewhat inflammatory, and I don't agree with all of it. I do want a ceasefire. I do want peace in the Middle East, but I feel like this is outside the purview of the city council to really make a statement, and that the city, the people in the city haven't really come together to have discussions. I implore us to have a forum or a time that we can all get together and, you know, a larger group than who submitted the resolution to have a talk and share views before we come to the council to present something. I would be willing to, you know, accept another resolution that was more inclusive. I don't feel like this is at this time. So I just want to express that opinion that I don't stand behind this particular resolution, but I'm open to discussion and further exploration of solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Vicky, and then Sarah Johnson.
Mayor Blackburn and city councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I stand before you as a mother, a minister, and a resident of Hood River for more than 15 years. I am grateful for your leadership and for your care for our community. And this action is about care for our community, both locally and internationally. I'm placing before you this evening a pair of children's shoes. They are empty, and they are intended to symbolize the more than 12,000 children who have been killed by bombs, tanks, and guns in Gaza in the last 4 months. Bombs, tanks, and guns that have been paid for, as Pastor Miranda said, by our tax dollars. We do not know all of these children's names, and that is unfortunate, but we know some of them. And there are 12 people here this evening that have the name and age of a child, a real human being on their bodies. People who, many of them newborns, who never will see the light of day, never walk in any pair of shoes ever. After the horrors of the Holocaust in the 1940s, many people of conscience around the world vowed to never again stay silent while innocent people are being slaughtered, no matter the intensity or cause of the fear or hatred that is driving the violence. The murder of 1,137 Israelis and foreign nationals by Hamas on October 7th, 2023 was wrong, heartbreaking and horrific, and it must be loudly condemned. The murder of this number is from yesterday, so it was 29,692 people in Gaza yesterday. We just learned that there were 96 more people killed in the last 24 hours. So 29,692 plus 96 Palestinians in Gaza since October 7th, with hundreds more every day, most of them women and children, is wrong, heartbreaking, and horrific, and must be even more loudly condemned. Not just because of the staggering numbers, because the loss of any life is tragic anywhere, but because we, each of us in the room, are supplying the weapons that are destroying lives, hospitals, homes, I'm almost done, and schools. We are complicit. And so I come to you this evening asking that you exercise your leadership in your power to speak on behalf of a permanent ceasefire. The people of Israel and Palestine deserve to live in peace with justice and true security. This cannot and will not be achieved by violence. Only the hard work of a negotiated two-state solution will lead to the flourishing of all children. These are times when silence is immoral on all levels of leadership, times everywhere, when everyone on every level of power must speak out in the spirit of never again. That time is now.
Thank you, David. Sarah and then David McAfee.
Blackburn City Council. I'm Sarah Bellinson. I moved here about 6 years ago, and I came here tonight having absolutely no idea how I felt about this. I'm going to be honest. I think as an American Jew, who's been to Israel and has seen how Palestinians live and also how Israelis live and the whole complex issue of apartheid there, leading to the anger. I get that. And I think what they did was abhorrent, and I think the response was abhorrent. And so I am not really sure yet how I feel about this resolution. I can't really answer it. I do think that we need more discussion probably before we actually submit a resolution, because I believe that this war is really dividing us nationally. And I think it's leading us to a very dangerous place nationally. And I don't feel prepared yet, even though I'm completely horrified by what's going on, to say that we should speak for everyone here. And so I guess what I would like to see is that we have an open forum like Matthew suggested, and that we get more consensus before we actually make a formal resolution, unless we make a resolution that says, it will certainly take the word murder out. This is a war. And so, I I personally can't say that it's genocide, even though it appears to be genocide. Genocide is a different thing. And so I would like to have more discussion and maybe a toned down resolution that does call for a ceasefire, because I definitely think we need a ceasefire. I support that. And that's all I have to say, but thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
David, and then is there anyone else who intends to speak? I have only David on my list. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak to us. All right, David, your turn.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience, thank you for letting me address you. My name is David Maccabee. I'm some of your neighbors, some of your friends, some of your physicians. Many of you I haven't met. My direct next door neighbor is an 84-year-old woman who fled Germany at the time of the beginning of World War II. She didn't want to become a Nazi. That's the literal truth. She and I discuss politics 3 times a week in front of our 2 homes when we're shoveling snow. She's horrified about what's happening in the Middle East. She's absolutely dumbstruck by it. And she was also horrified about tonight's resolution, as was I. I do have a particular bias. I'm quite clear about it. I'll be quite upfront with you. I lived in Israel for more than a year. I have family who live there. I've hosted 3 of the 4 bar mitzvahs that occurred in the Columbia River Gorge in the last 5 years. I know the community well. And tonight's resolution, I think, is well-meaning, but misguided and very poorly worded. I have no doubt that the occupants of this room, the people who have spoken before us, are compassionate, they're well-meaning, that the city council is good-hearted, and that the intent of this motion is one of good intent. But I think that the resolution has no business being voted on in this forum. And I think that the resolution is so poorly worded and so biased that it has no place here. There's no question that the Palestinian people are suffering. Families are being destroyed. Communities are being destroyed. That is absolutely true. And as the pastor stated, we do have a moral obligation here tonight. That obligation is to understand the meaning of our words and the impact of our actions. Mr. Mayor, you requested that we state if someone else has said something that we agree with, that we keep our time short in order to just be succinct. So succinctly, although Mr. Tui, the leadoff speaker, was bombastic and I think inflammatory in his own way, his initial message, I think, is correct. This is not the business of the city council. Ben stated that as well. And I don't think it should have made it to tonight's agenda in the first place. The language is clearly inflammatory. The use of murder in the second statement is somewhere between misguided and outrageous. And it doesn't mention the primary perpetrator and the underlying reason for the current conflict. The word Hamas doesn't come up in it at all. This is clearly a divisive issue. Tensions are high. My heart is beating fast. Why would you introduce that into this forum, which has to do with whether or not, in my opinion, typically sewage might be backing up into our home or the stoplight might be working on the corner of 2nd and Oak? Amira, the teacher who spoke earlier tonight, wears a Palestinian child's name on her chest. I wonder if you wear the child's name of any of the women who were raped or dismembered on October 7th, or if you even think of them as well. I do know some of them.
David, keep it wrap up.
I will wrap up. Friends and neighbors, there's no question that a tragedy is unfolding, but you have to understand that any call for a ceasefire in Gaza is a vote for Hamas the way this is written. It is a vote for the permanent loss of the Israeli hostages who are still missing. It is a vote for the destruction of the state of Israel. Hamas's charter is the destruction of the state of Israel. It states that very clearly. You can read it yourself. From the river to the sea, the motto that's being bantered around means that. Never again means never again. Never again means never again shall Jews of the world be facing genocide. And that's what that means. So you can take the term and I won't say twist it, but use it for your own means. But please understand where that came from and what your words mean. Friday vigils are great. If you want to wave signs and have people honk, I'm all about it. I'm one of the people who honks, actually. But any public resolution for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza is a call for the destruction of Israel. It is a statement that this city council stands with Hamas. That is not my stance. That is not my neighbor's stance. And that is not my city's position to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming to speak to us. Some people think we shouldn't have put it on the agenda. Fair point.
Others think that it was very important when it was brought to us. We could have handled this differently. We handled it this way. Let's hear from counselors. Anybody want to speak or make a motion or lead off? Gladys, go ahead.
Yeah, I fully support a ceasefire. And I think that we should use language that was drafted by for example, the House of Representatives. It's a 2-pager. I don't think that we should vote for what has been submitted by our constituents for us to approve on. I would be happy to approve something else similar to what the city of Seattle has already approved or the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Gladys. Doug.
I really appreciate everybody that came here today to speak. Yeah, I mean, this personally, I have Israeli friends that currently live in Israel. I dedicated most of my studies in university to international politics and deeply, deeply feel for the Palestinian people that, you know, are wrapped up into this conflict, that are receiving everything that we've been hearing about as well. I am deeply sympathetic to what happened to the Israeli people and that. So I think we all are, but I think that both Sarah, Matthew, and others that have said that this is, you know, a well-meaning sort of thing, it can be misguided was a word as well. I agree with Gladys in that the way that this is written or the way that it could be written is very problematic, right? I personally want a ceasefire. I don't want to see any more loss of life, but I don't want to inflame the community by not having the right use of words. And I feel like what we should be deciding is, you know, if it is within our purview or not has been discussed tonight. For us to craft a resolution accurately would take staff time and would require more community input, in my opinion, to craft a more well-meaning message. Whether or not we should be spending time to do that was something else that I would like to discuss with the council, but I agree that, you know, if we are going to put a resolution out there, that it shouldn't be this resolution. It should be more inclusive in terms of both sides. It should be more, should use less words like murder, et cetera, just because those, you know, if you have that opinion, you're entitled to that opinion, but I feel like that language does inflame the situation. If the point is to get across that we want to support all of our community members, which we do, whether, you know, whatever faith that they may have, I don't feel like this resolution is written honors that. So if we're going to pass something, it should be a different wording, and we should decide whether or not that, you know, how that process takes place, and how much time it would take, et cetera. But yeah, agree largely with what Gladys said.
Mark.
Thank you all for coming. I mean, I think that this gets to the bottom of why this is on the agenda, which is we're a community, and having the community be able to interface with each other and have the deep conversation and come together stronger is our goal. I was horrified by October 7th, and I'm heartbroken for the families of the hostages. I'm horrified by the ongoing conflict in Gaza, and I'm heartbroken for the people that are there. I don't really think it's something that Hood River City Council should tell the world what to do. I think that Hood River City Council should facilitate and talk to our people about how do we act as a community? How do we support each other as a community? Both our Palestinian friends and our Jewish friends should feel supported, and that's the ground that I'm sort of looking for. The resolution in here was brought to us by very well-meaning people, but was not written by the city. It was not written by city council. It was what was brought to us. We have read what Corvallis has said and what Eugene has said as local examples. I personally think we rally locally. We encourage people to talk to our representatives at the federal level, to give to charities that are helping the people on the ground. I mean, I'm a fan of UNICEF, but there's lots to choose from, and think globally, act locally. So, thanks.
Thank you all for coming. This is a really hard one on a personal level. I think like many people in this room and in the community, strong personal opinions about the horrifying impacts to civilians of October 7th and the months following, and kind of the ongoing emergence of lack of water and food and humanitarian aid. But that's, the personal opinion versus I am sitting with, and a number of folks brought it up, of really from a policy end, I don't think this is appropriate for city council to take a stance on or to really engage in. And I'm aware that's not a satisfying answer for many folks. But it really does feel like it's not related. Everything else we've done in the past there's at least a tie to city specific scope and activities. And this is quite a leap from that. And I don't think is what we're here to do.
Brent, would you like to speak? Or Tim?
Sure, I'll speak. I agree with Gladys and Doug that this particular resolution is not something that we should support. However, I do support a ceasefire. I would support signing a resolution stating that we're in favor of peace. We're in favor of people stopping the killing, right? What Hamas did was terrible. And I've heard this from everybody that's talked to here tonight. What Hamas did was terrible. What Israel did was terrible. It's just inherently wrong. So if we can boil the language down to something like that, I would support it.
Thank you, Tim.
I don't have too terribly much to add to what other counselors have stated. I don't think there's anyone in this room that is against the resolutions in support of world peace. I don't think there is anyone in this room that wants to see any more civilians die from this conflict. Not just this conflict, but the conflicts around the world. It's very difficult for us here to dictate or create a resolution that says this is how you should solve your problem halfway around the world to other people who Just the volume of death in this conflict upsets me as well. October 7th was upsetting. All the instances after this are upsetting. All the conflict that's in South America, from everything down there, is upsetting. Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I don't think resolutions here signed by us is our role. We as citizens can certainly speak up, add signatures to things, talk to our elected representatives, raise our voices individually to protest anything we want. This is America, is founded on freedom of speech. And that's what I would encourage everyone in this room to do. Outside of that, I don't have any other words for this.
It doesn't appear to me that we're going to have any counselor make a motion to pass this resolution. Feel free to correct me if that's mistaken.
No, not what's on tonight's agenda, not for me.
Thank you. I would like to thank again everyone who came. With very few exceptions, it was productive, thoughtful, non-vitriolic dialogue to us, testimony to us. I appreciate the counselors listening closely and deliberating this. It feels anticlimactic, but the way city councils do stuff is they make motions and pass them. I think what we're going to have here is an absence of a motion. So absence of a motion being made, not a motion being felt. I'll give a moment here for anybody to make a motion, but I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you all for coming very much. I wish you well. We're going to go on with our business, but I want to give you a chance to leave if you'd like to, or it always takes a moment. So we'll take a moment for you guys to. All right. Jen, nothing on city recorder? Abigail, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to give you a couple of quick updates. First, really good news, our stormwater project on the waterfront, phase 2, Tetra Tech reports that it is on schedule and on budget. The in-river work is done or will be done very, very soon. And the rest of phase 2 will be finished very soon. We have secured the Wacoma building easements. That was critical for phase 3. And so the bids for phase 3, we anticipate will come out in the next month or so. So that's great news for that project. I also have an update on the Rand and Cascade traffic light. I know we are all eager for that to be done. This month, February, they will be working on sidewalks, curb ramps, and retaining walls. In March, you'll see the poles go up, the signal poles, the light poles, the pedestrian poles, and signage. And then in April, you will see asphalt and traffic striping. So progress continues. I know from the winter, it felt like not much was happening there, but things are picking back up and we'll see some movement soon. Then we have
Abigail,
yep.
I just missed it. Is it going to be done after April? Or?
I think it's done in May.
Okay.
So these are the updates I got so far. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
in a couple of weeks I'll come back to you with more updates. Then I just want to note we have 4 vacancies right now, which is a lot for us. And there are 4 really different and professional positions. So if you can spread the word, one is for operations manager, that's in Public Works. We are recruiting for an additional police officer, a firefighter, and a wastewater engineer. So I think at least, I think the operations manager and the firefighter all closed this week. So spread the word. And then finally, as I think you all are aware, there was a tragic action in our community on Saturday. And I just want to say again, thank you to our police and sheriff and Wasco County, all of the law enforcement agencies that responded to that. It was sad, but I'm thankful that it didn't spread. And so I'm very appreciative of our police today. Thank you.
Thank you for all that, Abigail. Any questions for staff on this?
Yeah, I do. For any of these positions, like the operations manager, the wastewater engineer, are we contracting someone to do a search, or is that you're just hoping that we'll have someone here locally apply?
Right, thank you for the question. The only one that has a further reach, I mean, we've put things on Indeed, which of course has a national reach, and others. But I'll point out with the wastewater engineer, we are working with Windsor as part of their contract. They are helping with that one, and we have some real targeted ads in the wastewater engineering industry publications or their websites. So that one has a very targeted recruitment.
Committee reports, Gladys.
Nothing for me.
Tim.
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Doug.
No, there was a meeting that took place for Visit Hood River that I was not able to attend and Mark was not able to attend. So want to make it clear to Visit Hood River that we do want to participate. It's just it was a tough time for both of us. We both look forward to catching up with Katie to really debrief on that. So hope to give an update once we meet with her at the next meeting.
Thank you. Megan.
Sister City Board got moved to this coming Wednesday, so I have not attended.
I also failed to attend my only meeting, so.
Right.
None.
Nothing for me on reports. For the mayor comments, we are going to make a proclamation supporting Hood River County Reads program. Let it be said. Let it be so. Council comments. Grant.
I don't have anything.
Mark.
One quick question on the consent agenda. There was a thing about 1,000 feet of Montello, but it never said where on Montello.
And I was gonna ask, but we were on a roll, so.
I believe it's 9th in Montello.
9th, okay, sweet. That was just a curiosity question. Eric Haney sent, I ran into him on the way down here.
He sent me an email and I'll forward it through Abigail
That the Resolution Center didn't win some funding that they were counting on. They're doing a lightning round of letters to the legislature as individuals. I think as the ask, not as a city or as a council. So I'll certainly read that and possibly, I'm sure everyone in Salem is waiting for me to send an email. But that's it. I don't have anything else.
Mayor.
Oh, excuse me, Mayor.
Nope, excuse me. May I elaborate on where the 1,000 feet are? I said 9th and Montello, and Adam has texted me to say it runs from 7th to front on Montello. So I was slightly off. I apologize.
That's in front of my house.
Again?
I know. Well, no, before it was behind my house. From 7th to front, I mean, past 2nd east.
Yes. Front would be first.
You can't drive on front up there, but it exists conceptually. No, from 7th all the way to the end. Okay, that's my neighbors are gonna care about that. Yep. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now, where? Megan.
I did my normal for fun, attended the county meeting, and actually for council, went and supported Abigail presenting on the Rand Road update and CET. Kind of still vague ask, but they were having a larger conversation about their CET availability and other asks coming down the pike. So the board didn't make a motion that night, but my read, and Abigail can correct me, is that they certainly were generally supportive of still allocating a significant chunk of CET to Rand Road. So that's good news. And then while I was also there, Will presented about kind of our question on the Urban Renewal Board or other ways to be involved or engaged, which I assume Will be updating because it sounds like he was also connecting with some other agencies in that same week. Sorry, there were a bunch of things that were kind of relevant to the city. So I think you guys already saw the email that they're interested in following up on the annexation joint meeting. They're going to have an individual meeting with the same person we met with in January to kind of get everyone on their end up to the same place. So I think that'll be helpful. They apparently have had a stakeholder committee on the Powerdale property, kind of coming up with a work plan, and it sounds like they'll get an update on that in March. So if there's anything relevant, I'll let you all know. And then just general community interest, they are starting up the planning or plan update processes for the natural hazard mitigation plan and community wildfire plans. So something the city should certainly be sure we're following.
Thank you, Megan, for that cross-pollination activity. It's really valuable for us to get a summarized report of what happens there. That helps me to maintain the right context. You said something about Powerdale. There's a couple pieces of that. Can you just say a few more sentences about that?
Yes, so not about the water rights stuff. That's on hold for the indefinite future. This is just so the vast majority of the what used to be Pacific Core land, they had about 400 acres. The vast majority of that is owned by Columbia Land Trust, but there is 2 chunks. One at the old powerhouse, which is where people access the not really legal trail, and then one up at the old dam site that's not publicly accessible anymore. Those are both owned by the county. And so my understanding is, I think it's a joint stakeholder group with the county and the land trust and presumably some neighbors and other interested parties. And admittedly, they just mentioned they were going to get an update. So I don't know what the exact focus was, but I think some kind of long-term planning about what to do with the land. I imagine probably tying into some of that email we got a couple of weeks back about, you know, we're worried about flooding on the islands and folks that are struggling with houselessness. So, but I actually don't know details because they didn't bring it up. So
thank you. That's helpful. Doug.
Nothing for me, Mayor.
That brings us to the end of our agenda.
Gladys.
Did I flub?
Gladys,
Tim, go ahead. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I went that way. I went left to right, right to left. Okay. Tim.
Thanks, Mayor. I did want to kind of make a pitch that I'm not exactly sure that it's totally beyond our purview to have formulated and supported a resolution on Gaza, because I think really our job is to represent the people of Hood River. And obviously a lot of people thought this was an important issue. So, or it doesn't have to do with sewers or roads or anything. I'm not sure that that's entirely all of what you should consider. So I'm hoping that we kind of follow through on some of that somehow, right? So I don't think it's wrong for us to address topics like these.
Thank you. So I'm going to follow up on that right now. When at our previous meeting, a group of interested folks came and spoke to us, and I made an executive decision that what we were going to do is put it on the agenda for tonight. And so that's what we did. I don't really relish going through this again. I wonder if we do move something forward, we're gonna get this again, and maybe this is our job, and maybe people are going to tell me I have bad leadership, I should go to Gaza, and that's just part of the job. But I want to be more deliberative and deliberate about what we decide to do about this issue, if anything. So I'm hearing Tim suggest he would like to see it addressed again. Would folks want to speak to that idea? Go ahead, Gladys.
Yeah, we have a resolution, the resolution for racial and social equity within the city of Hood River. And the first line reads, whereas the Hood River City Council adopts Resolution 2017-02 that declares that the values that we hold within our city are inclusive of all people. We will fight discrimination and recklessness in all forms, and described by the city as a safe place of sanctuary and safety that nurtures our culture of trust between, so on and so forth. So I agree with Tim that this is something that we should absolutely discuss, whether we want to move forward and have any sort of resolution that is specific to a ceasefire, or we can all agree, or if majority rules, right, that we don't put something out. I would be for a ceasefire resolution similar to what the House of Representatives have already submitted. So getting in line with something along those lines. I've also looked at a resolution from the city of Seattle. That one's a little bit longer, but would welcome a conversation on how we're going to, if we're going to move forward or not, because I heard 3 folks say this isn't something that we normally do. And then I heard 3 others saying, yes, let's do it as long as we draft language that's more inclusive. So I too am confused around how we're going to move forward, if we're going to move forward at all.
Thanks, y'all. Doug.
Yeah, I would echo what Gladys and Tim have said. I do not think that it's proper to simply just, at least from my perspective, just say that, this resolution didn't pass, we're done. It's certainly not something I want to spend all of our time on, but our community, both the community members that gave testimony online, the community members that came to speak to us, the community members that I've spoken to, there's a few that say it's outside of our purview. There's many that say it's within our purview. And I don't want to over debate that, but I do feel that we should craft something that does speak to this and does align to the resolution that Gladys just referenced, to show that, if anything, that, we have resolutions that address this kind of thing. And I'd be happy to work with Councilor Rivera and Councilor Cunahan to draft something if they would be willing to do something like that to make the language more attuned to what I think all feel.
Mark and then Megan.
My gut reaction is that the resolution that we have talking about the importance of the community and that everyone is valued is what we want to point back to. I have in front of me the Corvallis resolution, and they've removed any reference to a ceasefire, any reference to the conflict, and it is all about the community that supports and engages a challenging changing population with a welcoming community, and therefore the city council resolves that engage in meaningful talks for lasting peace within, and they're talking about within their community, not so they came back from a global stance to a local stance, and that's where my head is.
Megan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've already said, the general, I think outward facing federal or international policy thing without the tie to Hood River, I don't think is our place, and I'm not supportive of. To Mark's point, I think if we're doing a kind of inward facing thing of this community values racial and social equity, we condemn any instances of anti-Muslim or anti-Arab or anti-Semitic actions. Like, I mean, that's at least internal to our city and does feel like it's more appropriate. Not that this isn't a very critical thing, and again, that it's not something I don't care about personally. To Doug's point of how much time are we spending on this, I do worry about, because I think given the high tensions we saw tonight and the last meeting, and clearly for the last 3 months, this isn't going to be a simple thing to do. And I don't have an answer on what that is, but yeah.
I was getting to some of this when I was talking. It's really easy to sign a resolution in favor of general world peace, generally supporting our community, not having any discrimination, hate speech, etc., within our community. As soon as we go down, my opinion is, as soon as we go down the road of taking this particular conflict and doing any resolution for this particular conflict or any other particular conflict, then it opens up every conflict to have its own discussion, resolution, and local conflict. We did the resolution that Gladys mentioned as an inclusive, universal resolution of these are the values or the rights or the opportunities that we provide for everyone. And so if we were to talk in a more universal terms in things we support, I think that may be better than for lack of a better descriptor, picking and choosing.
I do think it's likely if we choose to forward something, draft and propose passing something that people will come and tell us why we should be doing more. So just, I simply make that prediction about terms of spending time. Doug.
I agree with that. I'm just not sure it's a reason to not do it. I don't want to be, to take in some of the people that made very inflammatory comments and spoke to us horribly. I don't want that to cloud what a lot of the people that have come here in well-intending circumstances and thoughtful action are trying to do. So yeah, I mean, the problem with me on this is I agree with all of you on what you're saying. It's not easy. But I feel like our communities reached out to us and would like to have something more pointed towards this conflict because it's affecting them. And though I do think that we have resolutions that are out there that are more universal, I think they're asking us to speak for them. And I, for one, think we should with a better resolution.
So, excuse me, Mark, just a second. The majority, I would say, of the testimony we heard tonight was requesting calling for a ceasefire. And what I'm hearing Tim and Gladys and proposing is not entertaining calling for a ceasefire. It's more of a local value statement. So that is not going to be giving what most folks ask for. Mark.
I'm just thinking out loud, but it seems like us reporting out as opposed to a resolution, us saying, we love that conversation. We have the previous resolution about, equity and inclusiveness. We have basically summarizing these things of what's important to us at the local community. I question whether a new resolution means as much as just saying loudly that we heard you and we think that the city is trying to do that, short of calling for, some action anywhere specific, that we're encouraging this type of coming to us. So I think we can do that without a resolution, or I'm asking whether can't we do that without a resolution?
I agree that this is complex. I was chatting with a couple of you this last weekend, and, I don't think that President Biden is going to open up this email and say, oh my gosh, ceasefire from Hood River, like, let's do it, right? I truly don't think that we have that level of impact, but our constituents are asking us to speak on this. So whether that is a resolution, whether that is a statement that we make as a council, or whether we reiterate our existing resolutions, I think we should say something as opposed to not anything at all. There was a comment earlier of we should have said something back in October, and I agree that we should have said something back in October very similar to, this is not something that we condone as elected officials of the city of Hood River.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Gladys, that I have a friend who's done a lot of medical work in Tanzania. And that has experienced like huge setbacks because of the local politics happening there. And this group whose name I don't remember, sorry, is bombing that group whose name I don't remember, sorry. I mean, there's a lot of world out there. And we passed something that was quoted in this discussion tonight, just after Trump was elected. There was another one that Abigail brought to my attention that we had taken a stand on. But by and large, when horrible goes on out there, we stick to our knitting and sewer and fire and planning. And so I guess I would encourage us to remember that there's a lot of room for us to do nothing. We had dozens of people speaking so passionately about this, but there's 8,500 of us in this city.
Yeah. Also, we as individuals don't have to say nothing. That's what I hope the audience heard, is that they can still raise their voice. The thing I struggle with is, do we as the government body do that, especially for this particular instance?
I would say that the folks came to us and asked us to do it. It's a pretty good indication to me. Right?
Yeah, folks will come to us all the time for any myriad of reasons.
But they didn't. They came for this grant. Right. They didn't.
They came.
They don't.
They came for this and they came against this. But yeah, I understand that this was a community-driven resolution that was presented and requested of us. Yes.
So I'm going to get a little procedural on us here. I would say that if y'all would like to pass something, please contact me with at least 3 counselors in support of it and say, for example, I, Counselor Doug, have a resolution and I've spoken to a couple of colleagues and they support this. And then we'll see if we have 4.
I'm not sure we can do that given the serial meeting issue.
Yeah, we have to, that has to be a public meeting. We can't do that.
Doug,
Is that why you meant 3? Because that's not a quorum?
yeah, not a quorum, not a pre-quorum. And we're not voting serially, but convince me that it's something we have good support for, or we could have competing resolutions. One person's not enough for me to want to put it on the agenda.
See, Chris is coming on. Chris, can
Yeah,
you?
Chris, like what are other folks doing? Help advise us here.
Thank you.
One thing is, it is perfectly within the purview of an elected body to take a position on a matter of public interest. So resolution, I spent 6 years in the legislature and watched them pass resolutions on all kinds of things. That said, some judgment is always advisable in doing so. Secondly, the walking quorum issue only applies when there's a matter pending before the city council. You can talk city business among yourselves all you want, and it's not a quorum outside the public meetings laws unless it's on a matter that's pending before the city council. So if this resolution is not approved tonight and there's not another one pending before the city council, you can certainly discuss matters among yourselves. The same way you could do water rates or sewer rates. As long as there's no resolution to raise the rates or lower the rates pending before you, it's not a walking quorum issue.
I'm reluctant to spend so much council time on this topic. Anything else on this topic? Doug?
Just that I wish we would have had this conversation when people were present.
Hmm.
So I'll take blame on that, but I want to be able to encourage people to participate in the process. I want them to be able to understand that maybe, yeah, we can't, there's a lot of times where people ask us to do something and we can't do anything about it, but I don't want to discourage them from public advocacy, from doing what they believe in, from going to the state or whatever. And, you know, I mean, they're not going to watch the end of this. So
Yeah,
I
that
think
would,
we need to be more conscious of that in the future, all
that
of
would have
us.
been better.
Well, can't we capture some of that back? I mean, I think
We
that
have the
that's,
emails of the people who spoke.
I mean, that's the report back thing, right? Like, hey, whether it's talking to the, to the reporter that may or may not have been here and just saying, hey, we want to tell the community, here's our summary, and it's not jump in the lake, right? None of us are saying jump in the lake. We're
Of course
all
not. Yeah.
trying to say similar things, with a slightly different line cut through it. No one has said I don't care about Gaza or Israel or any of these places. So can we do those things without saying, da, 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 here's a resolution? That's my hope.
Well, that's why it's, we already have a resolution that's put in place. If that's something that we want to reintroduce, then this is how we feel about all sorts of matters around the lines of, social equity and just, we could do something like that as opposed to just not speaking at all. That was just a suggestion.
So flesh that out, the two of you. What exactly are you imagining? Emailing the list with our existing resolution that we passed in 17? Is that the idea?
So I think we can do more than that. So when environmental stuff, when Peter was on council, he would bring a coal train thing to council every meeting pretty much. And we had an environment, a broad environmental, the stuff matters resolution. And we would say, absolutely, here, let's, pull out those things that we said before and reinforce them. And I think Gladys's point is we have this really good resolution that speaks to a large part of this community feeling. And we should, whether reaching out to these people specifically seems fine, but to me, it's, there's a bullhorn that can say, we heard it and, this is in line, we think that it's in line with what we've, these other things that we care about. And this, this resolution is a example of that. I don't know how to do the communication. I don't know, when's the next newsletter come out?
We're about midway.
Huh.
4 votes makes a yes.
Or I'm a little unclear. For votes makes a yes.
4 of y'all decide something to do, it will be done. But I'm not sure. I've heard Gladys and Mark talk about a fairly specific idea.
I think that our attorney gave us guidance on what we can talk about afterwards. So I think maybe it gets back to your thing, Paul, which is if you guys come back to me before the next meeting and you have a plan that has legs, do it. Is that
we good? Thank you all. I want to
Sounds
thank,
good.
I thank the folks who came. I want to thank again you all. That is hard work listening to that. And I appreciate your presence and your caring and your service. And turns out we do water and sewer and cops and fire and this kind of stuff. So.
And you too, Mayor. Appreciate
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anything
we
else?
all signed up for this, and that means leading into uncomfortable conversations, as uncomfortable as they are.
Anything else for the good of the order? See you in 2 weeks.